Welcome to 10th Tuesday. This is episode number 42. Michael Boldin, I'm joined by my good friend
Michael Maharrey.
Okay, we've got a little new setup here going on, so if there's some technical glitches here on Facebook, I do want to apologize for that, but we've been on about a 4-week hiatus, and we're glad to be back, of course, right?
Always glad to be back.
Okay, so today, episode 42 is day 614 that the GOP has failed to repeal Obamacare or gun control or en masse warrantless surveillance. So on this episode, we're going to discuss, we're going to focus our energy primarily on a massive amount of spending and debt that's being piled up year after year after year, and it's getting worse now that the so-called small government conservatives of the GOP are in charge.
No, wait. I've been told it's getting better because of things.
Well, we will definitely get into that. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about some of the new mass warrantless surveillance programs that are getting thrown in our face. So let's first get to our first story of the day today, Mike. Mark. Wow, I haven't. How have you been the last month, Mike?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Hey, you're a new person.
My name is Mike Maharrey.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
So the first thing that I want to cover is that remember back when we talked about the omnibus spending bill that they passed, what was in March of this year? It was $1.3 trillion in spending.
I remember that.
We were corrected.
It was a record.
We were corrected and told that this was some kind of a 4D chess move.
Right.
And that it was only being signed into law and passed by the GOP because it was a strategic effort to, it was going to reduce the size of government in the long run. And
right.
What I noted I went back and I looked at the original reporting on this, and I saw over and over and over, and I actually watched the live broadcast of the signing ceremony or Trump's press conference on it. And
right.
He said this, quote, "But I say to Congress, I will never sign another bill like this again. I'm not going to do it again." Nobody read it. It's only hours old. Some people don't even know. It's $1.3 trillion. The idea was that the president was reluctant to sign a massive spending bill because it funded all kinds of garbage, including some of the things that he thought were incredibly important. So he wasn't going to do that again. But yet we've seen spending increase and increase and increase. And I think they're in the process of passing 12 new spending bills. I don't know if it has to be done by the end of the year. But they've already signed 3, if not 4 of them. One of them just moved past the Senate by a vote of 93-7, an $854 billion spending bill primarily for the military, but it also included funding for Obamacare. Mike, have you followed that one at all?
Wait a minute. I thought Obamacare was repealed.
Yeah, right.
No? And you know, this belies that, two things cross my mind as you're talking. First off, how do you even keep up with all of this? You know, it's not like there's a budget and they pass a budget. It's this piecemeal. We're going to pass this bill and it's going to last for 5 months. And then we got this bill and it's going to fund this for 12 months. And it's such a freaking hodgepodge of confusing gobbledygook, and I'm pretty sure that's the intention. And then you look at something like the funding of Obamacare. You know, we're told that, we're going to make this go away. Well, the Republicans could make this go away. I mean, they could have repealed it, right? I mean, that's what they were going to do, but they don't have to fund this stuff. And yet it keeps getting funded. Not only does it keep getting funded, it keeps getting funded to higher and higher levels all the time. Now, I haven't looked at all of the various
It's impossible
bills
to keep track of all of it. Mind you, the NDAA that went through was $900 million. It raised funding. It was supposedly done to, quote, rebuild the military, according to Secretary Mattis.
Because we weren't spending enough money to begin with.
They were already spending more than the next 9 countries combined.
Right.
The increase in military spending that they added in the National Defense Authorization Act for 2019, the increase is more than the annual budget that Russia spends, the so-called great enemy of the United States. I do want to give a shout out to Phyllis, Dave, Leroy, Richard, Virgil, and a few others that are watching in the live stream here on Facebook. On our 10th or Tuesdays, we broadcast on Facebook. I also do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday show that I live stream over on YouTube. We will actually post this after in the archives to some alternate sites because we hate these stupid social media companies. They are partnering with the NSA. They are ripping us off for all of our information. We're voluntarily giving it to them. It's nice to keep in touch with family and friends, but we would like to encourage people to use other platforms. So we also post these, all of our broadcasts. We repost them over at bitshoot.com and also at real.video, which is run by Mike Adams, who originally started naturalnews.com. He's a friend of the 10th Amendment Center, spoke at one of our events. Hi to Clay Davis as well.
Hey, Clay.
So good to see you guys here. We are talking about the crazy amount of spending. And Mike, this idea that they're funding Obamacare, I saw, and I focused on my Monday, Wednesday, Friday show, I was talking about Ted Cruz, who has always kind of just made my skin crawl as some kind of a fraud. Now, mind you, when Obama was in office, he was willing to do a shutdown. I mean, for as far as a shutdown was going to go over the funding of Obamacare. And some people were saying, you know, this is just a stunt because he doesn't have the votes to do it. But he still, you know, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to stand for the right thing, whether you have the votes to do it or not. You're not supposed to only do the right thing if you get enough other people on board. Right. Like, I'm going to stand for liberty if everybody's on my side means you'll never have liberty. So if Ted Cruz is a good guy, he would oppose Obamacare no matter what, right?
Well, you would think. But
well, he did oppose it at this time when he didn't have enough votes, which is what the GOP did over and over. The GOP House voted, what, a dozen times or more to
flat repeal, right?
Full, clean repeal of Obamacare when Obama was in office and it wasn't going to be signed. As soon as they get control of the House and the Senate, they stop doing it. And then you got a guy like Ted Cruz who was doing the right thing, risking a shutdown of government, which we'd love to see.
Shut her down.
Yeah. I mean, even these so-called shutdowns, we know never really shut anything down or anything.
They closed the outdoor.
A few parks, right?
Right.
So he's one of the guys who voted for this in a 93-7 vote, $800 million or $800 billion in funding, including funding for Obamacare. Why? Because he's being challenged by someone from the left. He actually might lose his role in the Senate. Well, if he loses it for being a good guy, well, then the problem isn't him. The problem is the general public not being educated on the principles of the Constitution and liberty.
Well, yeah, that's a huge part of the problem.
Of course. But to have a politician just, you know, okay, I'm going to support politician A over politician B, and I don't care if they shift to the left or to the right or if they become a socialist or if they vote for these programs because they're challenged by someone who's harder to the left. We don't want that. You don't want a chameleon. That's a slime ball. You can't trust those people.
Well, and is it really any better? I mean, is it any better to have the leftist in office or the right-winger who acts like a leftist when he's challenged? I mean, what's the difference pragmatically or practically speaking? I mean, either way, you get Obamacare, right?
Yeah, if the end result is that Obamacare keeps getting funded, then all the people who put tens of millions of dollars into the Ted Cruz campaigns in recent years, they've been wasted. There are better ways to spend your money. Maybe find some state-level candidates who are willing to nullify all these clowns that keep funding the stuff. So after signing this $1.3 trillion, I'm sure we're going to hear some excuse from somebody saying, oh, well, this one was rushed through, and the only reason he said he'd never sign this one again or one like this is that it wasn't read until the last minute. I don't care. The fact is that they keep funding more garbage. Repeal Obamacare on day one is not the same thing as signing another bill to fund Obamacare. We'll see what he does because this thing is going to pass the House. Whenever they get back to work. I don't know what we call work there, but it's really bad. And then I also wanted to point out that Ron Paul did an interesting article a few weeks, maybe it was in July actually. The title was Spending Our Way to a Fiscal Crisis. And he was reporting on some new research that says that the federal government is spending approximately $52,000 per second.
That's incredible.
$52,000. And he says this, not last year's tax cuts, is the reason why national debt has reached a record 21 trillion. We're getting close to 22 trillion, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think we crossed 21.3 in August, and it's rapidly speaking of August and spending, the Trump administration set a monthly spending record in August. It's the largest monthly outlay in a single month in the history of the United States. This is our fiscally responsible Republicans. $433.3 billion.
Is this of any month ever?
Any month
ever? Or is
ever.
it just an August over August?
The way it was put was it is the largest monthly outlay in history. It was the largest deficit for an August ever, but it was the largest monthly outlay.
So we were told, of course, and we talk about this all the time. I know I bring it up a lot, Mike, that we were told by so many GOP types, and even some libertarians, surprisingly, some longtime supporters of the 10th Amendment Center, was that, get on the Trump train. Stop worrying about this nullification stuff. Because all you have to do is beat Hillary, and you're not going to have to deal with, and we heard this in response to efforts to nullify Obamacare, nullify NDAA indefinite detention, nullify mass surveillance, nullify gun control, nullify unconstitutional wars. Over and over and over, all through 2015 and 2016, was just beat Hillary, stop Bernie, and this stuff would go away. But the fact of the matter is, it's all getting worse. And the spending is very dangerous. And I actually like to point out, I did some coverage of George Washington's farewell address. And I know some people would call George Washington kind of a big government guy. And in many ways, he certainly was. He wanted more and more central power. His letters between he and James Madison and some of his other friends really talked about he liked a centralized power in comparison to what they had. But comparison to what they have today, not even close. So Washington talked about, in his farewell address, he talked about, the peace with other nations, unity, religion. And you did a great article, Mike, and wrote a good script for me to put out talking about not turning a blind eye to constitutional violations. But he also talked about cherish the public credit. Use it sparingly. And the reason is if you have massive amount of debt, according to George Washington, you were going to be in a dangerous situation. In light of more security and more liberty, he said you should cherish the public credit. So having a mass amount of debt, being indebted to other countries, other entities, leaves you in a dangerous and very precarious situation for physical security and for our liberty.
Yeah. Thomas Jefferson made a very similar point when he was talking about the prospect of central banking. And to kind of summarize what he said, he basically said that a government should not run up more debt than can be paid off in a single generation. And he said to do otherwise is essentially ripping off posterity. And so Jefferson and Washington, although on really kind of divergent sides of the political divide of that time, agreed about the dangers of this type of massive debt. And it's interesting because a lot of times when you start talking about this, of course, when Obama was in office, the debt was really bad and we were really worried about it. But now we're not worried anymore. And they'll tell us that the tax cuts are going to allow us to grow out of the debt. We're going to grow the economy, and that's going to allow us to pay off the debt. And I've got bad news for these people. Debt hinders economic growth. Yes. They say that once debt gets above about 90% of GDP, that it decreases growth by 30 to 40%. Well, by most estimates, we're already at 105% of GDP. The Congressional Budget Office, which is pretty conservative, projects that we could be at 145% GDP to debt ratio within the next 20 to 30 years. We're not going to get all this economic growth. I don't care how much you cut taxes. The problem is tax cuts are great. Tax relief is great. But what we really need is we need government relief. And we're not getting that from this administration or any administration for that matter.
You know, I was actually listening to one of Peter Schiff's podcasts. And for those who don't know, Mike are you a lead writer over at schiffgold.com?
I am the I forgot what my title is.
Well,
I don't know my own title.
basically, Mike does a lot of the day-to-day reporting for Peter Schiff at shiftgold.com. And you also do the weekly podcast there as well. Interviews, videos.
Yeah, I have a podcast weekly called the Friday Gold Wrap. And then I also do, I'm doing a series of video interviews with various people. I did an interview with Jeff Deist last month. We talked about the Federal Reserve and central banking and the economy. So it's all gold-oriented economic type of.
But you're also talking about the massive debt, and I hear some of this stuff, and I'm like, oh, this ratio, and my eyes glaze over.
Yeah,
and I think for most people it does because the numbers are so insanely high. But George Washington told us this is dangerous. Don't go crazy with the public credit if you want security. Having, and I think Rand Paul, who I think has many flaws, talked about this. If you want better security, you got to have a better economic system. Sam Earl in the comments says, is there even a budget, or is the deep state just running away with a checkbook?
And no, there isn't, and that's part of the problem. There isn't a real budget. I mean, these bills that they're passing are omnibus bills, and they are stopgap bills. They're not actual budgets. So what they do is they get up to this deadline, and then they pass another bill that funds things for another 6 months. They're kicking the can down the road, kicking the can down the road, kicking the can down the road. At some point, don't you run out of road?
Yeah, well, we know that things that can't go on forever don't. And now I was reading an article from from Lawrence Vance over at Future of Freedom Foundation. FFF.org is one of my daily reads, along with LouRockwell.com, Mises.org, antiwar.com, and a few others. But he was talking about the NDAA from over the summer that was $716 billion this year, and an increase of $82 billion from last year. We're talking about close to $1 trillion. But now this kind of goes to the comment there about the deep state from Sam, because he says there are actual estimates of black budgets. And I've heard this from people like Chalmers Johnson before he passed away pretty often, that they don't even count in the black budgets that are put together. And he's saying total spending on national security actually tops $1 trillion a year, and that's not even counting the black budgets. So we don't really know how much they're spending. This is what they're publicly telling us.
Yeah, and to that point, we talk about a $21.3 trillion debt. Well, that's just the outstanding debt. That's not even getting into the unfunded liabilities that are coming down the road. I mean, it's astronomically above even that 21.3 trillion, which is something we can't even conceive of. I mean, here's an interesting stat, just a kind of a perspective thing. They estimate that just paying the interest on the federal debt, so just the interest payments before we start funding any program, is going to exceed the amount of money spent on Social Security on an annual basis. So we're going to be spending more money just on interest payments than we're currently spending on Social Security. That's within 30 years.
Again, I got this from Chalmers Johnson at a speech. He was talking about the amount of money that the U.S. borrows from China every single day in order to pay off this national debt. He said things that can't go on forever don't. This cannot continue forever. We don't know when it's going to fall to pieces, but at some point it cannot continue to be propped up. Hi to Dennis Marburger. Thanks for tuning in, Dennis. Amber says, why are Americans being held responsible for 9/11? I mean, if you think about it, the idea of mass surveillance, and we're going to cover this in a little bit, mass surveillance, we're supposedly being attacked by terrorism because we're so free.
Right.
But bin Laden's dead, and ISIS is not taking my freedom or yours. ISIS isn't spying on me. ISIS isn't doing civil asset forfeiture. ISIS isn't doing a federal gun control or enforcing the National Firearms Act of 1934 or the Gun Control Act of 68. ISIS didn't just vote like Ted Cruz to fund Obamacare, which is a ripoff for generations. ISIS isn't giving us a $21 trillion debt. The U.S. federal government is treating us like terrorists. They're ripping us off, and they're attacking our liberties at every turn. Our enemy, our opposition, it should be pretty obvious where it comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. And you know, this idea that we need to go to Tunisia. Do you know we're at war in Tunisia now?
Man,
I just saw this today.
You know, it blows my mind. I don't listen to Scott Horton as much as I should. His podcast is almost daily.
Yeah.
Scott Horton Show, or scotthorton.org. And he covers he's like the living expert on all things foreign policy. He's the lead editor, op-ed editor for antiwar.com as well. And of course, I've learned so much about Yemen and about Afghanistan from him, from about the history of the Iraq War, which has been going on for decades now. He calls it Iraq War 1, 2, 3 now, I believe. Right. But now to get a report that the U.S. is involved in Tunisia. I did a report the other day, actually just yesterday, talking about how the U.S. Military empire is ramping up its threats of war against so many different countries, whether it's sanctions on China for buying airplanes from Russia, or it's threats of action in the coming days, pending action against Venezuela, or the Trump administration, I'm not sure who was talking about it, wanting to invade Venezuela. If you think about it, they're talking about the people of Venezuela deserve to have a government that listens to them. They're not getting what they want. But here in the United States, you know, you could have a 98 to 2% opposition to things like the bank bailouts back in 2008, and the government didn't listen to that. I mean, should we invade ourselves? So you bring up Tunisia and war, and I think your report on the cost of war really ties into this pretty well. The astronomical price of America's undeclared wars. I mean, certainly all wars are expensive, but when you declare a war, then you have a specific enemy that you're fighting against, and it has a start and an end. It's not just an open-ended war on a ubiquitous term that really covers everyone in the United States. And as I think it was Amber pointed out in the comments, you know, really, they're treating us like the ones who perpetrated 9/11. They're spying on us at every turn. They're taking our rights. They're treating us as suspects. They have indefinite detention without any due process against anyone. They can assassinate American citizens without, just with a drone. So your report talking about this, and part of the issue of foreign policy is that, A, it costs an incredible amount, not just financially, but in lives and in resources, and it destroys our economy. It makes us less safe. It creates more enemies. Tell us a little bit more about that, or am I just rambling here?
Well, no, you know, the thing that really struck me about this, because I started looking at these numbers, and first off, it's interesting to note that the number that they came up with, which was, I think was $5.6 trillion is what they estimate the U.S. has spent on war since 9/11. And this doesn't even count all the wars.
I got to interrupt. Retarded comment of the morning. Alex D. La Barba says, so when Obama doubled the debt, where the hell was your smart ass? Every now and then we're going to get some moron that says something stupid like this. Mind you, the 10th Amendment Center has been around since 2006. We oppose every single constitutional violations, no matter what clown is in office, whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's George Bush, or the new one. It doesn't matter. What we care about is the Constitution. Only the enemies of liberty in the Constitution claim things like this. It's okay, or where were you? And you know what? Even if I only started doing it today, what's right is right, no matter who's in charge or for how long you've been saying it. Sorry, Mike.
I don't know about you, but my butt was right here doing this.
Exactly.
Right? Anyway, back to the astronomical price of war. So what was interesting to me, because I started thinking about this, do Americans really want to pay $5 trillion for all of this warfare? If you actually had to go each year and write a check to the Defense Department to pay for this war, I think people would think a little bit more about what's going on in all of these foreign interventions. So if that was the truth, going back 17 years to 2001, every taxpayer in the United States would have had to write a check for $1,352.94 every single year. That's your share of the. Now, here's what's amusing to me. People will tell me, oh, Mike, what are you so upset about taxation for? Taxation is the price we pay to live in a civilized society. So I'm paying $1,352 for civilized wars.
Yeah.
What? So yeah, just, you know,
but it's the people with no backbone who are afraid of people living in caves on the other side of the world. I mean, mind you, the right to keep and bear arms, our natural right of self-defense. This is the most armed up country on our. Well, it should be far more armed up than it is.
right.
But we have so many compliant gun owners who don't have a firearm unless they have a permission slip. We have so many compliant gun owners who say, oh, everything's okay as it is, but they're okay with the national firearm. They're okay not having machine guns. Really?
I want a machine gun, dude.
I mean, I don't know if I'd have one, but I think the idea I think the idea of the right to keep and bear arms and gun ownership, and when you have it and you don't know who it is, when you go into a neighborhood, you know, that's what makes it dangerous for an invader or for a criminal. You don't know who might have what kind of weapon. And if you realize as a criminal that you have a higher powered weapon than all the law-abiding citizens there, then you can be more aggressive. And, you know, there was a great line in this old Humphrey Bogart film. I'll remember it later. But anyways, go on. So one thing that you also reported on, or we covered in the past, was this article from Andrew Tylock. I know you worked with Andrew about big spenders getting worse. And I think we covered this in our last episode, episode 41, how big spenders get worse every single year. And we can go through the whole history all the way to the 40s, and you can have it in current dollars. Is it current dollars that
Yeah, I think it was $2012 or $2009. It was inflation adjusted. Yeah. I don't remember what the year was, but it was relatively recent. I want to say it was 2009.
So they basically kept the spending, the dollar, the date that the dollar was being calculated, because they keep deflating, or
right.
I don't know the right terms. You're the guy to talk about. What am I doing?
What are you doing?
Are they devaluing the currency? That's how to put it, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're devaluing the currency.
So
they're adding more and more dollars to the system, and as there's more and more dollars in the system, each individual dollar's worth less.
Okay.
So
the way I've heard it explained,
worth less every single day.
The way I've heard it explained is if you have $1 today and then they print more, then the $3 chases the same amount of product. Exactly. So then you're basically getting 1/3 the spending power.
You sound just like an economist just then.
I've read some Rothbard. So I've read some Mises. So, FDR, who was a lot of people think of as the one of the worst big government guys in modern times, spent $512 billion. $512 billion.
Right, and now that's adjusted to that's not $1940. That's $2009. So this is comparing apples to apples.
Bill Clinton spent 4 times that much, $2 trillion. 2,649.6 billion. So 2.6 trillion, right?
Right.
Obama, much worse, 3.3 trillion.
And I was complaining about that just in case anybody was wondering.
Yeah, in case some clown wants to say, where were you? And then Trump, and mind you, we were just talking about how it was the right thing to shut down the government, even if you don't have the votes, or go for it, do a filibuster over just Obamacare. Not even talking about all the other spending, because Obamacare shouldn't exist. And now the Republicans are funding it. Nonsense. Trump is up to 3.5 trillion. Average yearly spending. So it is getting worse and worse and worse. And the problem is, no matter who you vote for, whatever you vote for, Team Blue versus Team Red, they look at the previous administration as the floor, not the ceiling of their power. So the current administration has actually gotten worse on spending than Barack Obama. And I don't care what kind of garbage excuse people have. It is worse. They are spending more, and that's a problem.
Yep. I think that sums it up as well as you can sum it up. And, you know, here's my message to Trump supporters, to Republicans that are out there that are listening, that are mad at us right now. And I'm sure that there's some people out there. The problem is you need to hold your people responsible. That's the problem. They're your guys. You need to get on their backs. And if this is your principle, demand that they uphold your principles. The problem is that when somebody's guy gets in power, then all of a sudden they're willing to make excuses for the things that were unacceptable before. Hold your guy responsible to the last guy.
I think
Have some principles.
I think the problem is that they don't have principles. I think the problem is when you have a bad foundation, you end up with bad results. So if the foundation, we're talking about having a foundation of the Constitution as a goal to get more liberty. The goal, if you're going to have a federal government, you need to have a line in the sand on what it's allowed to do. That's what the Constitution is. That's what the 10th Amendment centers is all about. That's what the 10th Amendment itself. It's a legal rule of construction that the feds are only allowed to do the stuff that's been delegated to it in the Constitution and nothing more, and everything else reserved to the people of the states as the people of each state determine. Simple stuff, right? You do your stuff, everybody else will make different decisions on their stuff. And the whole point of that is this is the solution to all the political infighting around the country, all the people at each other's throats. You have a giant country like this. People here in California certainly are not going to have the same political, economic, religious, or social viewpoints as people in South Carolina. And that's the way it should be. That's how you can have the Constitution creates a system where you can actually have these varying viewpoints all living under a big defense umbrella in peace. But instead, we have one-size-fits-all solutions from everybody on the right and left, and that's a real problem. Where was I going with this? Oh, principles. I'm ranting. I'm sorry, man. The principle thing drives me crazy. I started out as a leftist. I marched in the anti-war movement with a lot of communists, Answer Coalition, for many years.
Right.
There were tens of thousands of people in the streets here in Los Angeles and elsewhere. Soon as Obama came in office, they were gone.
Poof.
It's as if Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize for being peaceful. But the fact of the matter is, and you know this, Mike, that during Bush's 2 terms, he dropped 70,000 bombs. He was considered the worst warmonger in modern times by the left. Well, their hero, the peace president, dropped 100,000. He's even worse. And they were just gone because they don't have principles. Well, they don't have... Their principle wasn't being anti-war. Their principle was being pro-left-wing guy.
Right.
So as long as their guy wins, then, of course, anti-war gets thrown out the window. The same thing happens on the right. When Obama's in power, the GOP votes repeatedly for a clean repeal of Obamacare. And Republican activists in the grassroots are in favor of that, even though they know it's not going to get signed. They say you have to take a stand, you have to do what's right. Now, when the Republicans control every level of Washington, D.C., all you hear is excuses from these same people. Oh, well, you got to kind of do this or that, whatever. It's all bogus. And that's a big part of the problem, is that people have bad foundation and no real principles. Well, their principles are garbage. Oh, hi to Joe Wolverton. Joe, Joe is a great author and researcher. And did you actually... I had mentioned to you that Joe and I had chatted a little bit. Did you actually get in touch with him?
I did. I sent him an email yesterday. He emailed me back, and now I owe him an email. So he's been doing some writing for us.
Yeah, we've been cross-posting a lot of Joe Wolverton's articles. He does a lot of great historical research from the New American magazine. Joe had mentioned to me that he wanted to do some more original writing for a number of other publications, and boom, yeah, anytime. So good to see you here in the show. Hi to Brian Burns. Amber Bliss, another good question. Did any of them ask America how to spend this money? And we need to go back to precious metals-backed money.
Amen.
Of course, like Brian says, you can also abandon fiat and embrace crypto. Basically, this is something that we've talked about. As long as government controls the money, you're going to have a problem. Government is going to inflate, right? And but we can do an end run around that. How can we do that with crypto and gold?
Use it. Create currency competition. Undermine the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money.
Okay, well, that's the short version of it, right?
That's the short version.
Okay, well, let's shift over. We've got all this crazy amount of spending that we've been talking about. I also wanted to talk a little bit about spying. Now, you covered a report from Electronic Frontier Foundation. I gave it a juicy title. It says, "Surprise, Secret Court Fails to Oversee and Control Federal Spying." And for those of you watching live, we will put all these links in our show notes. We post this. We'll add this probably to Facebook. I don't know how long we can put notes, but if not, we will also embed the video over at blog.10thamendmentcenter.com today. So you'll be able to kind of research all this and look through the links that we're talking about. But Mike, give us an overview of what's going on here with this secret court not controlling, well, I guess secret federal spying, really, when you get down to it.
Right. The secret court cannot control the secret federal spying. And it was really interesting. The folks over at the EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation, they do fantastic work in the realm of surveillance and electronic technology and those types of things.
We got to give a shout out to Shahid Buttar, who has been a long-time personal friend and working relationship friend. I haven't talked to Shahid in a while. We've been communicating a bit on Twitter. Shahid is definitely a progressive, kind of a Green Party leftist, but he's the kind of guy that I trust because on issues that we agree on, stopping the surveillance state, stopping the empire, he's not going to shift his views just because a lefty's in charge. He's still opposed to those things. Sure, I'm sure we don't agree on economics. I think the same thing could be said for people like Glenn Greenwald, for example. But when you can find things to agree on, there's so many things going on. Why not work together on those things to get something done? So back to EFF, sorry.
Yeah, so EFF did some open records requests and actually got some of the secret rulings, I guess that's the word, or opinions, that have been handed down by the FISA court. So this is the Foreign Intelligence Service Act, FISA, and it created a court that is supposed to oversee foreign spying. So the idea is that if you are an American citizen, the federal government has to get an actual warrant to spy on you. But if you live outside of the country, then the federal government can spy on you, and there's some limits, and the FISA court oversees all of this foreign intelligence gathering. And basically, FISA has morphed into a giant domestic spying program because the laws are so ambiguously written, they've been so expanded and so abused that they basically allow agencies like the NSA, the FBI, to dragnet collect data and store it and access it at will. And so there's supposed to be some oversight, especially when it comes to data that is owned by Americans. But these opinions that were issued by the court reveal that basically these government agencies ignore the warrants. Sometimes they don't even bother to get the warrants. They exceed the authority of the warrants. And the court really can't. I got myself choked up. The court really can't do anything about it.
I got you covered. See, this is where I come in. I'm good at pinch hitter. For those who know the joke, I have been a long-time pinch hitter. I pinch hit for Dave Smith at the Tom Woods 1000th episode celebration in Orlando last year. 5 years ago, I was the pinch hit keynote speaker for Lou Rockwell at PorkFest. So I'm pinch hitting for you. I can't speak on this with the expertise that you do, though. Mike, you doing all right?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Okay, cool. So back to EFF's report. So basically, the whole idea of this secret court was that it was going to give warrants for specific things, and then they're just doing broad-based. Everybody with a Verizon account, collect that. Everyone with an AT&T account, collect that. And sometimes they're not even getting these broad-based warrants. They're really looked at, and I think Joe Wolverton actually did an article on this. They're really, maybe a couple of years ago, Joe, you can let us know if you've got a link. These are really general warrants. And this is part of why there was a Declaration of Independence, because general warrants were such the antithesis to the idea of individual liberty that people fought a war to get away from it.
Yeah, let me read this, what this FISA judge said. So like you said, they're basically general warrants to begin with. And now we're finding out that there's even less control than we would be led to believe by the existence of this course. The judge wrote, moreover, the government's failures in this case are not isolated ones. So he's talking about the failure of the government to report what it's doing, that it's been exceeding the scope of what the court had said it could do. It's spying on people outside of the purview of this FISA warrant. He says the government has exhibited a chronic tendency to misdescribe the actual scope of NSA acquisitions in its submissions to the court. These inaccuracies have previously contributed to unauthorized electronic surveillance and other forms of statutory and constitutional deficiency. So we've got this court, and it's interesting because I've been deeply involved in the surveillance issue here in my hometown of Lexington. A lot of you that have been following along know that I was actually sued by my city government for digging into open records relating to cameras that our police department has and uses. I've been told by so many people, hey, Why are you worried about it? You don't need to worry about what the police are doing because the courts are oversee it. The courts are protecting our rights. There's a rigorous court. Bull crap. The courts aren't doing anything. They can't do anything. They're depending on the FBI, the NSA, your local cops. They're depending on it to tell them the truth, and they're basing their warrants on what they're being told by these government agencies. The government agencies are lying, and they're basically spying on all of us, and the court can't do a darn thing about it. So if we're depending on these courts, which are vague and open-ended to begin with, not constitutional, if that's what we're depending on for our liberty, well, this is why that we don't have any.
Well, a lot of people just hate liberty. They hate the Constitution, especially from the Republican and Democrat voting camp. People who are just in those, I support somebody because they're on Team A or Team B. Those people are anti-constitutional because they continually make excuses for their guy once their guy or their team is in office.
I don't have a guy.
Joe Wolverton, who and he's working on this series of articles or essays discussing, this is at least what he communicated to me, discussing the resources that the founders look to, the writers that the founders look to for their philosophical basis. Mm-hmm. He referenced a quote from Samuel Pufendorf, who I had to look up.
What a great name.
So I love how I'm learning stuff. I hope you guys are learning things as well as we go through this. Samuel Pufendorf, this is 17th century. He says, parties care more about, quote, ruining their rivals than following the dictates of reason. And that's exactly what we see today. It's all about, and this is, I guess we could talk about Ted Cruz in that regards. Here's a guy who was willing to take a stand on Obamacare when Obama was in office, and now he's getting challenged by a leftist and might lose. His goal is more about ruining his political opponent, winning, vanquish the opponent, rather than standing up for what's right. And that would be to vote no on anything that funds Obamacare or any unconstitutional federal act, but no one really seems to take that type of position.
Yeah. One of the greatest monikers, I guess, for lack of a better word, that I've ever heard was one that was hung around Ron Paul when he was in Congress. They dubbed him Mr. No.
Dr. No.
Dr. No. Yeah, Dr. No. Because he would constantly vote no on all of this unconstitutional garbage. And he would be the only no vote. There'd be like 400 and, how many of them are 435? So there'd be 434 no votes and then one from Dr. No.
Yeah, one was about giving like some kind of award to the Dalai Lama. It was 434 to 1 or something like that. And it's always been a joke about he voted no on this. He's like, well, we shouldn't be paying for this.
Yeah.
So, hey, you could love the guy or hate the guy, but at least they're consistent. And that's how I'm talking about the same type of viewpoint that I have for people on the left or right. If there are areas that we agree, as long as you're consistent on those areas, then we can disagree where we disagree. That's fine. But people who shift back and forth, those are the real problems. So let's talk about this one last story from Jay Private, who's been publishing over here. He runs a blog, massprivateeye.blogspot.com, but we also cross-post a number of his. How did that happen? Did he reach out to you or did...
I don't even remember.
Which is really cool because we were sharing
a lot of... He started sending me stuff, and I think we started doing some emailing back and forth. He sends me a boatload of stuff every day. He sends me a lot of links outside of what he writes.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'm getting a lot of great information.
Incredible researcher on surveillance state issues. He's
a former private eye.
Okay, that's what it is. So he's got this report. Did you go through this pretty closely, Mike?
Which one?
The rise of spying transit police.
Yeah, kind of.
This is basically talking about how the next level of federal spying programs is for federal agencies and federal programs to embed themselves into local transportation. We heard for years that the TSA was going to set up at bus stops. Well, we know now that they're already installing full body scanners here at the Los Angeles Metro Rail system. So I'm a Metro Rail user. I haven't owned a car in a long time. I live in an urban area where my life is on foot or on train. But if they ask me to go through a body scanner to get on a subway to go to Santa Monica, It looks like I'm taking a zip car. I'm renting a car for the day because there's no
Call
way I'm
Uber.
going to do that. There's no way. It's pointless. But this is just another level of how the surveillance level is ramping up. In San Francisco, he reports, the BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, they created an app that spied on commuters' travel plans, their texts and emails.
Amazing. We did a report, and I think this was something that actually he tipped me off on. The new transit system that they built in Richmond has like 200 cameras that are included, and the cameras were required in the federal funding, and they are accessed by the DEA, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. And so basically what we're seeing happening is the TSA and the Department of Homeland Security has decided that the transportation infrastructure creates a really nice backbone to build a surveillance system on. And it makes sense because we all use the transportation system. We all get on the highways, we ride buses, we fly. And, you know, it's funny because I remember, 5 or 6 years ago when we were really pushing back against the TSA and when the TSA rolled out the naked body scanners and everybody was really upset about the TSA, you had that segment of people that are, oh, you don't need to worry about that. If you don't like it, just don't fly. Well, now it's gotten to the point that it's on the buses. It's in the subway systems. It's on the highways. You know, we're being license plate scanned and photographed as we drive down, you know, your interstate highway or even your state road. So the TSA, Department of Homeland Security, both of which should not exist under the Constitution, are using our transportation system as a backbone to build a huge surveillance state. And
they're just collecting more and more data on everybody. They know where you go. They're adding facial recognition to the license plate readers on the freeways. So if you have a fast track system, you don't even have to have one of these fast track systems like we do here in LA or in San Francisco. But if they have these red light cameras, they're also taking pictures, and many of them are being outfitted with facial recognition. And so they not only know who's driving the car, but they can also figure out, even going 60, 70, 80 miles an hour past hundreds of cars at the same time, they can figure out who's in the passenger seat. Yep. Now, that's not being rolled out everywhere yet, but they have the capability. They're starting to do that. They're adding body scanners at subway stations, license plate readers everywhere, drones with license plate readers and facial recognition. They're adding, they even are scanning people's texts. I mean, it's...
And I'll tell you something else, and I don't want to get too far afield into this, but I encourage everybody...
Can you get too far?
I can definitely get too far.
Okay.
I really encourage everybody. There was a New York Times article that was published, I think, 2 Sundays ago. And a friend of mine pointed this out to me. He's a missionary in Kazakhstan. And there's a lot of Kazakhs that go to China. There's a lot of Chinese ethnic Muslims that immigrate to Kazakhstan. So there's an exchange of people there. And there is a huge movement going on in a certain region of China, which is heavily populated by Muslims, to create re-education camps where they're taking people that get too Muslim, they become too religious, they're sending them to these re-education camps to teach them to be good communists. Now, how are they finding these people? They're using a massive surveillance state. And this New York Times article chronicles the way they're tracking people, determining their activities and their religious affiliations. And if, like I said, if you get too Muslim, they're sending you off to re-education camp. Now, people here are going to go, oh, well, those Muslims, you know. This could be applied to anybody.
I don't know who you're talking about.
You really need to look at what's going on in China right now and the way that their surveillance state is being used.
The social credit system, you know, and let's say, and I think that's part, we'll close it out with this. But again, going back to George Washington's farewell address and your article and my video that you wrote the script for, he basically said, don't turn a blind eye to violations of the Constitution. Even if you like the result or if it's a short-term thing. Because if you do that, this is the basis on which free governments are destroyed. So
Yep.
if you turn a blind eye because you're like, oh, well, these people are dangerous, or we need this healthcare program because people are dying in the streets, or I like my guy doing it, or I'm okay with it because they're doing so many other good things, or they're attacking the media, so I'm okay with them continuing to enforce federal gun control. That is what George Washington told us is the way that free governments are destroyed. And if anyone calls the U.S. government a free government anymore, they're an idiot. But we can look at that this has been the problem. Certainly there are bad politicians, but it's we the people that continually turn a blind eye to Team A or Team B or Program A or Program B because they like it, are okay with it, or just want to make excuses for it. Well, here, we're never going to do that.
Nope.
Which
we
means,
don't have guys.
Which means we're going to piss people off, and we're going to have, but you're going to find, if you've paid attention to us over the years, that even when we screw up, no, that doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah, it might.
We try to be, our goal is to be consistent.
Yeah.
Our goal is to be consistent on the Constitution. We may make errors, but we're going to go back and try to learn and go to the constitutional foundation, even if it doesn't get us the political result that you or I may want on this particular issue at this particular time, because if you stick to that foundation, then you at least have a basis for how to deal with things properly. So I appreciate everybody watching today. Man, I could go through all the people in the chat here and list everybody's name, from Dennis and Clay and Dave Benner, Sam.
Hey, Dave.
Joe Wolverton. Did I say Amber?
You did say Amber.
I appreciate everybody who's been here with us, whether you're watching live or you're going to see it later in the archives. If you support what we're doing, make sure to hit the like button. Leave some comments. Let us know your thoughts about this crazy spending, crazy surveillance. Maybe you love it. Tell us that, too. You might qualify for an ignorant comment of the week that we'll cover in the future.
I might write a blog about it.
So leave us your thoughts, or if you've got ideas on things that you'd like us to cover in the future, please leave us some comments. Hit the like button. That tells the algorithm at Facebook or wherever you end up watching it later, BitChute, YouTube, wherever. It tells that platform to share it with other people. It really helps us spread the word. And of course, if you really, really like what we're doing, we can't do this without the financial support to keep the program and the whole organization running. For as little as $2 a month, you can go to 10thamendmentcenter.com/members and sign up to be on Team 10th Amendment Center today. So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time here on 10th or Tuesday.